The asphalt next to me exploded like hail. All I could hear was my brother's ragged gasps in my arms and the frantic drumming of my own heart against my ribs. They thought we were just another statistic. They were wrong. The night shattered without warning. One moment, Leo and I were walking down Oak Street. The scent of late summer jasmine hanging in the air, the quiet hum of suburbia, a comforting blanket. The next, the world was blinding strobes of red and blue, the scream of tires on pavement, and the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. 2 police cruisers had boxed us in, their headlights pinning us like specimens under a microscope. Hands where I can see him, on the ground now. The voice was gravelly, amplified, and laced with an aggression that was completely out of place on this peaceful street. I felt Leo tense beside me. "What's going on?" he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Just do what they say, Leo." Slowly, I murmured, my own hands rising instinctively, palms open. My training screamed at me. Assess, identify threats, control the situation. But out here, under these lights, I wasn't a warrior. I was just a black woman with her brother, and that was threat enough for them. The officers emerged from their cars, silhouettes against the blinding lights. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a classic, severe buzz cut I could make out even from distance. He moved with a cold, predatory confidence. Officer Miller, I'd later learn. The other, Cheney, was younger, twitchier, his movements betraying a nervous energy that was far more dangerous than Miller's composure. "We got a report of suspicious individuals in this area," Miller barked, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Suspicious? We live 2 blocks from here," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We were just walking home from dinner." "Shut up," Cheney snapped, his voice cracking. "Get on your knees." It was the tremor in his voice that set every nerve in my body on fire. Fear makes people reckless. I saw his finger twitch near the trigger. Before I could say another word, Leo took a half step in front of me, a protective gesture he'd had since we were kids. "Hey man, just calm down, we're not." That was all it took. The world erupted in a deafening crack. It wasn't a boom, but a sharp, piercing sound that tore through the night. I saw Leo's body jolt, a dark stain blossoming on the sleeve of his gray hoodie. He crumpled to the ground with a grunt of pain and shock. Time seemed to warp. The jasmine scent was replaced by the acrid smell of gunpowder. The quiet hum was gone, replaced by a ringing in my ears. A primal rage, cold and focused, washed over me, extinguishing all fear. They had shot my brother. Without a second thought, I dropped to his side. "Leo, look at me. Look at me." I tore at his sleeve. It was a through and through, but he was losing blood fast. Miller and Cheney were yelling again, their words a meaningless buzz. All I saw was my brother's face, pale and slick with sweat in the flashing lights. "Zoe on," he gasped. That one word broke through my tactical calm. Run? I didn't run. I didn't leave my people behind. Not ever. In one fluid motion, I looped my arms under his, hoisted him over my shoulder in a perfect fireman's carry. His weight was familiar, a dead weight I had trained with for years, but this was different. This was my blood, my family. I rose to my feet, his blood soaking into my shirt, warm and sticky. I locked eyes with the 2 stunned officers. They saw a woman. They had no idea they were looking at a weapon. My boots pounded the pavement, each step a hammer blow of defiance. Leo's ragged breathing was a painful metronome against my ear. The shouts of the officers faded into a single, enraged command. "Stop, or we'll shoot." Another crack echoed through the street, and a bullet whined past my head, close enough for me to feel the displacement of air. It slammed into an oak tree, sending splinters flying. My mind was a crystal-clear machine, processing everything. 2 shooters, handguns, likely Glocks. Poor marksmanship, thank God. Open street, limited cover. The houses on Oak Street, with their perfectly manicured lawns and white picket fences, offered no sanctuary. In the strobing police lights, those fences looked like the bars of a cage. I'd been in more dangerous places, dust-choked alleyways in cities whose names I couldn't repeat, dense jungles where the enemy was a shadow. But this felt different. This was home. This was a betrayal. My lungs burned. My shoulders ached under Leo's weight, but the pain was a distant signal. My body was an instrument, and I was in perfect control. I pushed it harder, my legs pumping, my core tight. I scanned the environment, my eyes darting left and right. There, between two houses, a narrow gap. A service alley. It was dark, claustrophobic, littered with trash cans. It was perfect. A bottleneck. A place to control the engagement. Hang on, Leo. I grunted, my voice tight. Almost there. He was fading. His grip on my shirt had weakened. I had to get the bleeding stopped. I veered sharply, my change in direction catching the officers by surprise. Their footsteps faltered for a second. That second was all I needed. I plunged into the darkness of the alley. The immediate drop in light was a relief. The air here was thick with the smell of damp cardboard and decay. I ran another 20 yards before gently lowering Leo to the ground, propping him up against the cold, grimy brick wall. "Zoe, what are you doing?" he mumbled, his eyes glassy. "They're gonna kill us." "No, they're not," I said, my voice a low growl. I ripped a long strip from the bottom of my own t-shirt, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. I packed the wound, applying direct, brutal pressure. Leo cried out, his body arching in pain. "Stay with me," I commanded, my face inches from his. "You are not leaving me. You hear me?" Outside the alley, I could hear the screech of more tires, the crackle of police radios, the barking of orders. They were setting up a perimeter. They thought they had us trapped. My lips curled into a humorless smile. They hadn't trapped me. I had just drawn them into my world. For the first time since that first shot was fired, I felt a shift in the balance of power. They were hunting a victim, but they had found a predator. And this was my ground now. As I kept pressure on Leo's arm, the metallic tang of his blood filling my nostrils, the world outside the alley seemed to melt away. The shouting, the sirens, they became a distant hum. In their place, I heard the roar of the Pacific Ocean and the voice of an instructor, Gunny, screaming my name. My mind plunged back into the ice-cold surf of Coronado. I could feel the grit of the sand under my nails, the crushing weight of a waterlogged telephone pole on my shoulder, shared with 5 other men who doubted I'd last the day. I was the only woman in my class, a fact Gunny never let me forget. "You think you belong here, Zoe?" His voice would rasp, inches from my ear, as a wave crashed over my head, forcing salt water into my lungs. "This is a world for men. Go home." Every muscle in my body had screamed for me to quit. The cold was a physical entity, a monster chewing at my bones. But as I shivered, my teeth chattering uncontrollably, I would see my father's face. He'd been a mechanic, a man whose strength wasn't in his big, calloused hands, but in his unwavering belief in me. "True steel isn't the strongest, Zoe," he told me once, holding up a cracked wrench. "It's the one that can bend the farthest without breaking." So I didn't break. I held that log. I crawled through mud pits until my skin was raw. I stayed underwater during pool competency drills until my vision started to tunnel, my lungs feeling like they would implode, only to push off the bottom at the last possible second. I let their doubt, their scorn, their disbelief become my fuel. Each insult was a log on the fire of my resolve. Leo never knew any of this. When I left for the Navy, he thought I was going to be a cryptologist sitting behind a desk. For years, I was a ghost, a voice on a crackling satellite phone on holidays. I returned quieter, harder, my eyes holding storms he couldn't name. He couldn't know about the missions where silence was the only thing keeping us alive, where the line between success and a shallow grave was as thin as a razor's edge. He couldn't know about the faces of the men I'd saved or the brothers I'd lost. The weight of those memories was mine to carry alone. I couldn't burden him with my ghosts. I remember dragging a teammate, a man twice my size named Axe, across a sun-scorched desert, his legs shredded by shrapnel. Bullets kicked up sand around us, angry hornets seeking flesh. Axe had told me to leave him, to save myself. The same words Leo had just spoken. My answer then was the same as my answer now. Never. The cold brick against my back pulled me back to the present. The alley was my desert. The sirens were my gunfire. And Leo was my brother in arms. My father was right. Strength wasn't about muscle. It was about will, and my will had been forged in the crucible of BUD/S. It had been tempered in the heat of combat. It was unbreakable. The chaos outside wasn't a threat. It was just another training exercise. And I never failed. The shadows at the mouth of the alley deepened as Officers Miller and Cheney began their cautious approach. I could hear the crunch of their boots on stray gravel, the nervous clearing of a throat. They were trying to be quiet, but to my trained ears, they sounded like a herd of elephants. Leo's head lolled against my shoulder. His breathing was shallow, his skin clammy. "Zoe, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You can't fight them all. Just go. Please, just run." His words were a physical blow. The thought of leaving him was more terrifying than any bullet. I leaned in close, my grip on his wound unwavering. "Listen to me, Leo. I'm not going anywhere. We walk out of this together, or not at all. Do you understand?" "But how?" he pleaded, his eyes swimming with a mixture of pain and despair. "They have guns. They're cops." I looked at my brother, my sweet, kind brother who thought the world made sense, who believed in rules and fairness. He didn't understand the world I came from, where the only rule is survival. He had only ever seen me as his big sister. It was time for him to see the truth. "You don't know who I am, Leo," I said, my voice low and intense. "You don't know what I can do." I held his gaze, letting him see the cold fire that was now burning in my eyes, a fire I'd kept hidden from him for so long. He stared back, confusion warring with a flicker of something else, a dawning realization. He saw the way I was positioned, using the dumpster for cover. He saw the calm in my eyes, the total absence of panic. He saw the practiced, efficient way I was treating his wound. This wasn't the sister who used to help him with his homework. What are you, Zoe?" he whispered, the question hanging in the stale air between us. I took a deep breath. The secret I had guarded for a decade, the identity that had defined my adult life, was about to be spoken. It felt strange, saying it here, in this filthy alley, instead of in a sterile briefing room. "I'm a United States Navy SEAL," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a grenade. The change in his expression was instantaneous. The despair vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock, which quickly morphed into a wide-eyed awe. It was as if he was seeing me for the first time. The pieces of my long absences, my quiet intensity, my sudden physical prowess, they all slammed into place for him in that single moment. He wasn't just looking at his sister anymore. He was looking at a warrior. A surge of energy seemed to flow through him. He straightened up slightly, his grip on my arm tightening, no longer out of weakness, but out of a newfound strength. A faint, incredulous smile touched his lips. The bootsteps were closer now. Miller's voice cut through the darkness. "We know you're in there. Come out with your hands up." I looked from the entrance of the alley back to Leo. The fear was gone from his eyes. In its place was a blazing, absolute trust. He now knew what I was capable of. And as the shadows of the two officers fell over us, I knew that this night was no longer just about survival. It was about showing them, and the world, exactly what happens when you corner someone who refuses to be a victim. The fire I had forged was about to burn through everything in its path. The courtroom felt colder than the alley. It was a sterile, suffocating cold, steeped in the scent of old paper and cheap wood polish. I sat beside Leo, his arm now in a clean white sling, a stark symbol of that night. Across the room, Miller and Cheney sat tall and proud in their dress uniforms, their lawyers buzzing around them like flies. They looked like heroes. We were made to look like the criminals. The judge, a woman with a severe face and eyes that held no warmth, looked down at us as if we were something she'd scraped off her shoe. Every ruling, every sustained objection against our lawyer made her bias painfully clear. She believed the uniform. She didn't believe us. I kept my face a mask of neutrality, my hands clasped loosely in my lap. Inside, a familiar calm had settled over me. This was another kind of battlefield, one of words and perceptions. My training taught me patience, observation. It taught me to wait for the enemy to make a mistake. And they did. The prosecutor, a smug man with a slick-back haircut, strutted before the jury. He painted a picture of two dangerous, non-compliant suspects. He described our flight into the alley not as a desperate bid for safety, but as the act of seasoned criminals trying to evade capture. And consider the defendant, Zoe, he said, pointing a dramatic finger at me. She carried her full-grown brother, a man of nearly 180 pounds, while under fire and managed to evade two trained police officers. I ask you, members of the jury, does that sound like the action of an innocent woman? Or does it sound like someone with an extraordinary, almost unnatural ability to escape? Someone who might have something to hide. That was it. The mistake. The opening I had been waiting for. Our lawyer started to rise, but I placed a hand on his arm. "I've got this," I whispered. I stood up, my movement smooth and deliberate. The entire courtroom fell silent. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the room. "The prosecutor is right about one thing. My abilities are extraordinary, but they are not unnatural, and I have nothing to hide. They were earned." The judge glared at me. "You will address the court through your counsel, Ms." "With all due respect, Your Honor," I interrupted, my voice unwavering. "This is a question only I can answer." I turned to face the jury, making eye contact with each one of them. "My name is Zoe. For the last 10 years, I have had the honor of serving this country as a United States Navy SEAL." A collective gasp swept through the room. The jury members sat up straighter. The officers, Miller and Cheney, exchanged a panicked look. The judge's jaw literally dropped. I proceeded to dismantle their case, not with emotion, but with cold, hard facts. I described the physics of a tactical reload, explaining why Officer Cheney's claim of firing 12 rounds from his standard-issue Glock 19, which holds a 15-round magazine, without reloading, was suspect. I used the courtroom diagram to show the impossible angles of their supposed lines of fire. I explained the principles of cover and concealment, and why running into an open street, as they claimed we did, would have been suicidal for anyone with even a basic sense of self-preservation. I wasn't a desperate woman in a courtroom. I was an operator briefing a mission analysis. My voice never wavered. My hands never shook. I was presenting evidence, laying out the truth with the precision of a surgeon. I looked over at Leo. His eyes were shining with a fierce pride I hadn't seen since we were kids. He wasn't just my brother in that moment. He was my witness, my proof. The power in the room had shifted. It no longer resided with the uniforms or the title on the judge's bench. It was with the truth. And for the first time, I could see the jury beginning to understand that the only criminals in the room were the ones wearing badges. The air in the courtroom was thick enough to choke on as the jury filed back in. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket of anticipation. I felt Leo's hand find mine, his grip surprisingly strong. I squeezed back a silent promise. Whatever happened, we were in this together. I didn't look at Miller or Cheney. I kept my eyes fixed on the jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who now looked at me with a newfound respect. She cleared her throat and unfolded a piece of paper. The rustling sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. "On the charge of assault on a police officer against the defendant, Zoe, we the jury find the defendant." She paused, and my heart hammered against my ribs. "Not guilty." A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. "On the charge of resisting arrest against the defendant, Leo, we find the defendant. Not guilty." The room exploded. A roar of voices, of clapping, of shouts of joy and vindication erupted from the gallery. Our lawyer clapped me on the shoulder, a huge grin on his face. The judge slammed her gavel, but the sound was lost in the triumphant noise of justice finally served. I turned to Leo. Tears were streaming down his face, not tears of pain, but of overwhelming pride and relief. He pulled me into a fierce hug with his good arm. "You're my hero, Zoe," he choked out. I held him tight, burying my face in his shoulder. "No, Leo," I whispered back, my own voice thick with emotion. "We're survivors. Together." As we walked out of the courtroom, a barrage of camera flashes blinded us. Reporters shoved microphones in our faces, screaming questions. I ignored them all, my arm wrapped protectively around my brother. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, warm sunlight. My back was straight. My heart, for the first time in a long time, felt unbroken. This experience changed me forever. It taught me that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in faraway lands, but right here on our own streets. It showed me that you have to be willing to be a warrior, not just for yourself, but for the people you love. That night, I fought for my brother. In that courtroom, I fought for the truth. But I know the fight isn't over. It's only just begun. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up and fight for something you believed in, when everything seemed stacked against you? Share your story in the comments below. Please, always comment with respect for everyone's experience. If our story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe, because we all need to keep fighting for what's right.